good evening and welcome to another Let's Talk Life and Legacy, a moment with Dr. Grace. And I'm your host, Dr. Grace Kelly. It's always a pleasure being here with you. We enjoy your company and we look forward to interacting with you every evening. It's another day that we have been given this opportunity to share with you. And this afternoon, I just want to say thanks to those who have been here. You have come out almost every session, you've been here, every episode. You're here to share, you're here to listen, and you're here to grow. And we value that. Is masturbation a topic of comfort, a comfort level that we have? This evening, we are going to be talking about or exploring the topic masturbation and pornography and the impact that it has on persons and also on relationships. Is it okay for couples to use pornography or masturbation to get in the mood? What are some of the physical, psychological impact of masturbation and pornography on people and their relationship? How do we talk to our children about this important thing? And could it be that this is the one thing in life that, according to Freud, everybody could say, everybody's doing it. So why can't I? Well, I have my co-hosts with me, Dr. Pernell Bell and Shauna K. Pottinger. Let's welcome them and have them welcome you.
Hi, studio audience. Hi, Dr. Kelly.
It's good to have you here once more.
Thank you.
Hello, Doc. How's it going? Listen, I want to put pause here because I know that based on the topic that we have discussing tonight, there's absolutely no way that we can allow only 6 people on this platform to be. I mean, we're gonna jump right in, but I see that there are 7 of you on here, and if 7 of you are on here right now, just jump on your gadgets and just go on Facebook or go on YouTube and just hit that share button or send it to as many friends as you like, because I believe that this topic is a topic that is so germane to human relationships. Like, it's such a relevant topic that everyone should have been on here right now. So I'm going to encourage those of you who are on the live right now to just go ahead and share this feed so that others can benefit from the rich information that we have to share this evening. What do you say about that, Dr. Grace?
I am so excited about that. And I'd like to know who are these people who are with us, because these are all constant. So one of the things, guess what? I'm just thinking on the spot right now. We are going to give them the time to share, but we are going to give them a challenge. We are at 174 subscribers so far since we started in December.
Excellent.
And we'd like to know, if by the end of this session, or even by the beginning of our next episode, if we hit the 200 mark, guess what I promised to do? I'd like to do just a session. Sorry, Dr. Bell and Shauna, but it will be just me. Ask Dr. Kelly. So I'll give them a special on March 31.
We don't mind that. We don't mind
I know,
that.
right?
I just give them a special. So who are our special guests who are here? They are the first ones to be here, and normally we have some of our regulars. Let's give them a shout out.
Yep.
Wow, Coach Philip, I could count on that. This is a phenomenal woman who is always there to support and provide all kind of assistance and motivation. And boy, she's like a little bunny rabbit. I don't know how to keep it. Happy to see you.
Yes.
Wow, Roberta Chambers. Wow, she is almost a constant. I'm sure if we ask Roberta this afternoon, what are the topics we have covered since December, she could tell us all of them.
Pretty much. But Dr. Bell, Roberta is such a regular for the Let's Talk show. She actually is very familiar with your crickets. She actually said the crickets again. Yes, I think that was worth the laugh. Go ahead and share the feed with all your friends and everyone. Dr. Grace, I am so excited that you chose this topic to talk about because, as I did my research, meddling a lot of research as it really relates to keywords. Masturbation is one of those topics that gets so many hits, especially when you do a Google search. It's very clear to me that there are a lot of people who are trying to figure out if this thing is something that is immoral or not. And so I'm looking forward to the conversation that we will have this evening, because in many respects, it can be a very controversial conversation to talk about. And in some cases too, others are very uncomfortable having the conversation. And so I'm looking forward to the discussion. I just want to hear from those who are online right now, where you are joining us from. Could you just drop that in the chat, and also just let us know, how important this topic is to you. So Dr. Grace, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Shauna. And one of the things I found out in doing the research also for this evening topic, as a matter of fact, it is not just my idea. It was by popular demand. I was approached to do a presentation on this because it is such an important topic. And one of the things that we are going to, we hope that afterwards people can watch the replay, but one of the things that happened now with the change of time, it affects person's schedule, and so we're still going to move on. I found, Shauna, that the research indicates that in a particular leading pornography website, people spend 4.5 billion hours on watching pornography. 4.5 billion. And if they have to pay $1 or $2 or $5, multiply that to see how much money they would have had to pay to watch pornography. And it's a real thing. I also found that a lot of couples, they engage in pornography as I had asked the question earlier, is it okay for them couples to engage in pornography to get in the mood or in the groove for sex? Or in other words, we call that foreplay. Is it okay? And as you said, popular psychology, there are different views on the topic, and we want to have this ease of conversation. We do not want any person this afternoon to feel ashamed, afraid, or leaving here feeling less inspired than they came. So let's talk. Yes, Coach Hillett, glad to have you. Great to have you.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's most pressing on this whole topic, and from the materials that I have been able to browse over, I find that a lot of the conversation centers around, depending on who you're getting your information from. So from the Christian sources, they have one perspective, and then from the secular psychologists, you'll see another set of perspectives being offered. So I'm very excited to explore that with Dr. Bell, to get her to pick her brain in terms of what are the factors that that impact relationships and people when it comes on to these two subject matters, and how can we best manage them. Dr. Bell, I see that you changed spots, so
I know somebody is very happy.
I hear the crickets are getting
happy. All right.
The crickets are out there.
Yeah, while we get ready to hear her views and for her to share just as she settles in her new space, can we at least start with a conversation about what good, what we'd call it, sexual relationship? I struggled to say whether or not we should say what it looks like, feels like, or sounds like. Songs of Solomon 1 verse 2 says, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for your love is more delightful than wine.
I know that.
That sounds good. So talk about that. What should a healthy sexual relationship be like?
Well, so I think when we think of sex, we have to first think that this was created by God. And it was created, yes. And if the supreme being, who is just so awesome, made this for humans to enjoy themselves, it must be a good thing. Again, we have to recognize that he has given us guidelines in terms of how this should be done. And we know that it should be done, if we're looking at the Christian way, that it should be done within the ambit of marriage. And that, as you talk about what the scriptures have to say, I look at Proverbs 5, and it says, become intoxicated by the woman of your life.
Wow.
And so yes, that's the Proverbs actually say it, and that you should drink from your own cistern, and your own cistern is, the woman who you love and care for. So sex is more than an act. It is love being demonstrated, and I think it's the highest form of love that somebody could demonstrate, because it's like you're intertwined, interlocked. This person has
Is it
entered
me or is
your
it you
world,
that has frozen
and you
my
have entered the
system?
person's world to get some level
While we're
of
waiting for
love
her to come back, can
and
I
passion.
pick up on that conversation? Yes,
No,
go ahead, Doc. Go ahead. We
No,
lost
I
a
was
little
saying
bit.
love and passion that you experience from, this person. So love and sexuality, all of that is intertwined with the fact that God created this for human pleasure and for procreation. And it is something lovely.
Yes.
I agree. I couldn't agree more, Dr. Bell. And I think, like with every other beautiful thing that God has created, what we can say is that sex is one of those things that has been distorted. But when it comes on to a healthy sexuality, I believe it's best expressed within the context. And this is coming completely from my Christian view, that it has to happen within the confines of marriage, that sexual desires and all of these things are to be quenched within the ambit of marriage. And once that is happening, that is what I consider to be a healthy way to express that sexuality that God has given us.
I appreciate both of you going there because I had a version of a Bible. I was trying to find it today, but it is so explicit when it comes on to the whole matter of sex and love making and love relationship in Songs of Solomon and so on. And one of the commentaries said that sexual intercourse is such an explosive thing. It is so powerful when it's properly done that it needs the boundaries of marriage to contain it. If it is that powerful,
I
so it
love
needs the
that.
boundaries of marriage to contain it. And when you look at masturbation and pornography, one of the things that we need to realize is that sexual intercourse is a mind thing. It's a mind thing. So it's more mental than physical.
Right.
Because no matter how physical you are, if your mind is not in it, you cannot enjoy sexual intercourse. You can't. It's not something that you can hide and seek on. If you really truly want to enjoy it. And I thought what Dr. Bell was going to say earlier is that it is one of the highest form of communication between
Yes.
God, their partner, and man. So it's a triangle thing: God, you, and your partner, and it's the highest way of communication. And interestingly, I don't know if she made it onto the set this afternoon, but one of my very close friends this afternoon was talking to my brother, and I happened to have been in the space, and she said, "Tell her she should shout glory, hallelujah." And I said, "No, I can't shout that. You better be here tonight." Because where that came from, I give you the background, is that I was preaching at our church maybe about 20 odd years ago. And when we were talking about the same sex and sexuality, and that's where it came, that when you are into that mode, because it's communication between you and your partner, you should be able to shout glory, hallelujah, and be happy about it. Now, let's move back into, we are talking about the topic, but let's go to get to the masturbation. Everybody, Freud speaks about sexuality. That's all he talks about. And we are sexual beings and all of that. And everybody at some point they explore themselves, they explore their body, the feelings that they are having. So when I said earlier in the introduction, is this one of the topics that all of us could say everybody is doing it, so why can't I? Within that context, Dr. Bell, put that in context for us. What are the implications, physical, mental slash psychological implication of getting involved in masturbation and watching pornography?
So I just want us to kind of set the stage a little bit, because I don't know if everybody knows the term in terms of what is masturbation, because we're
Okay.
taking it for granted that they know and what is pornography. So
Okay.
I think we want to
Appreciate.
set that stage too. So when we think of masturbation, it's really a deliberate sexual self-stimulation. And we want to understand that from that context. And then when we think of pornography, it is actually the viewing of explicit sexual acts for sexual arousal and gratification.
Okay.
And so somebody deliberately, in a sense, I think masturbation is kind of a self sex. It's like the person is having sex with self. And pornography is that the person is viewing explicit sexual activities with the deliberate purpose of being stimulated sexually or aroused sexually. Now, I don't know, when we look at that act, sex was meant to be between two persons, and then there is self sex. And then pornography is you viewing someone else. You're viewing someone else,
In the
and
act.
that is to gain some sexual arousal. I think the conversation we were having before, when we look at that, is that what should obtain? That's a question we would want to ask ourselves. And then if I am having stimulating myself, what could be that psychological impact of me stimulating myself when I'm ready to maybe engage in the act with someone? Studies have actually shown that sometimes, because of, again, having been aroused by self through this masturbation, it becomes difficult for the person to engage in sexual activity with their partner. So that could be a psychological. If the other partner is not being satisfied, then we can see that that could affect the relationship. And if the relationship is being affected, it therefore means that this individual, they may be ending up with issues within the relationship, because the person does not feel that they are being satisfied. To masturbate is kind of a self-centeredness, where you're getting body sensations, sexual sensation from self, and that you're immersing yourself, so you're not looking to the other person for that kind of satisfaction. And this can become an addiction, where I'm thinking psychologically, it could become an addiction in the sense that rather than going to the person for satisfaction, you go to self all the time for satisfaction, and over doing this. So that also could be a problem.
And would it be, before you bring on, you share your next point, could the problem be extended to the point where when you finally get to have sexual intercourse with your partner, you are just gratifying yourself, so your partner may not be satisfied, and so that would also cause a problem?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And studies have actually shown that sometimes what happens is that when the person is ready to engage with someone else,
Mm-hmm.
because they have been masturbating, it may feel unnatural to them to engage with another live body, and that it could result in erectile dysfunction.
Mm-hmm.
And that
So
could be
other sexual
psychological too,
dysfunctions, right? Mm-hmm.
where the person is feeling like they're not satisfying the other person, when in fact it's satisfaction of self when we look at that for the masturbation piece. Pornography
Okay.
too can result too, where the person becomes more interested in watching and observing the act rather than engaging in the act, because already you
Mm-hmm.
have been sexually satisfied by just
Mentally,
observing, pictures or live sexual acts being carried out.
right.
Then engaging in it becomes a difficulty.
All
No,
right. Another point I want to bring out, oh, Shauna, just a moment before I forget this point. The scripture, it says what if you look at the other person and lust, that's where it becomes a problem. As in, and for some people, they get involved in masturbation and pornography so deep that, and they are thinking about somebody in particular, and they will see the individual afterwards and probably think that they may have had the actual encounter with them, and it puts them in a more you become more vulnerable,
mm,
because if you are in the space with the individual, you would be tempted to carry out the act that you have done mentally, because everything they said has been created twice, first in the mind and then. So if you are thinking about it, more than likely you'll act out on it. Shauna, sorry about yeah,
yeah,
yeah, I cut you off earlier.
That's a great point that
yeah.
you think
Dr.
of it
Bell,
twice.
there is actually a lot of disagreement around the issue, even of masturbation, especially among psychologists, right? And I want you to, for the purposes of those who are watching, Dr. Bell, sort of tell us what accounts for the differences in the opinions in terms of, because you have one group of people who tell you that you should encourage masturbation in your children because they need to explore their own sexuality for the purposes of understanding what works, and so that they can get some kind of sexual pleasure. No, that's really something that I've actually read, so that when it's time for them to actually engage in the act, they're able to share with their partner what pleases them most, and so on. Where do you draw the line as far as what constitutes healthy sexuality, as opposed, and what do you think accounts for that very wide gap in the entire belief system around this issue?
So we are sexual beings. So from the child is born, we find that the child is exploring their own body. So even a baby will be feeling the genitalia. A baby will do that. And as they grow older, they begin to better understand those boundaries of sexuality and what is right from what is wrong. The psychological camp is mixed when it comes to the fact that some on one side is saying that masturbation and pornography are normal activities that someone is actually exploring their sexuality. It's also said to be a good outlet and release, especially for persons who may not want to, Christian persons who may not want to engage in fornication, that they too can have their own sexual release, and that it is better to not be pent up, but that you can release it in a healthy way. So that's one camp. When we look though at some of what we were talking about earlier in terms of the psychological impact, then that's where we draw that line where it has been proven that both pornography and masturbation can lead to psychological issues, and we were making mention of some of those. So for example, some people could, because of pornography, masturbation, they could see the sexual act as, and the person who is engaging with them in it, as an object. That could be one thing that comes, like a mere sex object, not, and when we
Dehumanize.
define that God-given love and engagement. So if it is going to end up like that, that is a psychological play. So in again, pornography and masturbation, sex is separated from love.
Right.
So it's just sex and not love,
I see.
because
Okay.
it's just a release.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not loving anybody in that process, and it was meant for the sex was meant for that engagement of love. And so it could be seen, if not careful, as just a release of sexual tension.
I
And
see.
that we don't want to objectify the people who we are engaging in a sexual relationship with. We don't want to do that. No.
You know, that's an excellent point that you raise about the dehumanization of people when it comes on to that aspect of it. Because as we, even just recently, the last set of shooting incidents that took place in America, mass shootings, not the last one, the one that happened in Atlanta, Georgia, with this young man who actually walked into these shops to execute Asian women who he claimed were actual temptations for his sex addiction. And this is his way of purging the earth or cleansing the earth of these people so that he can live in a much more comfortable. So I could definitely see what you're saying, Dr. Bell.
From objectify
Yes.
rather than love.
Right.
Engagement in love.
All right. I really like to know what the audience look like, Shauna, and so we'd like to hear their comments and see some of what they are saying. But I want to go back to a point you made about the children exploring their bodies and those kind of things. One of the things that we need to realize is that I thought about the fact about honeymoon when you're married and you're supposed to have that moment to start exploring and so on. There is no significance to that anymore because persons have been exploring before, and so by the time they get to that, the honey drains out of the moon. So there's no sweetness. There's no sweetness to it. And the research has actually shown that married persons who have been, who start looking at pornography early, and those who are involved in masturbation, they are twice as likely to be divorced. And it is suggested about 6% likelihood of them, in terms of divorce, and about 11% of them in terms of the percentage of those who get involved with pornography and masturbation. And also it reduces, well, it breaks down, it causes a breakdown in the relationship. So one has got to know what is it that you want. And if the Bible tells us live and cleave, and if we want to live forever and enjoy a beautiful life together, we cannot be selfish about it. And sexual intercourse is not a selfish act. It takes two
To
to
tango.
tango. Real tango.
Not three. Not three. Not three. Not three. Not
Not
four.
3, not 4, not 5. Interestingly, I don't know it well. This is not something that I would have heard in a private counseling setting, but even in the research, you would have seen it that persons who get involved in pornography, it affects not just the relationship between them and the individual, but also within the family.
Mm-hmm.
and it can destroy the family also. Um, Persons, young people who explore with pornography, they may try to act out what they observe,
Yes. Yes.
and unintentionally may
Mm-hmm.
hurt somebody. So we have to be careful with that. Right,
Yes.
Dr. Bell?
Yeah,
Yes.
because if you are observing sexual activity, it means that you are going to be sexually aroused. And this could lead to, because in my movement, I have heard of cases where someone would have been engaging in pornography and then to ask for certain sexual kinds of act of their partner. Like, for example, we defined what pornography is. Sometimes pornography may involve watching gay activities. It may also mean looking at pictures, explicit pictures. And sometimes, in my experience, I have heard of situations where partners have asked to engage in threesomes,
Mm-hmm.
engage in
Mm-hmm.
homosexual activity with a partner who is not homosexual or who is not gay, because they have observed and their sexual desires have been aroused in this way,
Mm-hmm.
where the partner isn't into that, and that again could break the relationship. So yes, we have to be careful of what we're observing and introducing because of what the eyes have seen.
It's an
I
excellent
appreciate
point.
you sharing that. There's a very close friend, I would say, who long, long time ago shared with me, and that was, I mean, more, I think more like when I was in my teen years, just to help me to appreciate and understand the dangers of watching pornography. And I'll never forget, he said, listen, what you see on those movies or whatever, it's not real. There's nothing real about it.
Mm,
Um, it take several hours for them to get a 30-second view, and the 30-second view is multiplied by so many times, and it look like they keep going like a bunny rabbit. But there's nothing real about it. And if you start getting involved in watching these things, you will want to expect that
Mm-hmm.
from your
Yes.
partner when you are legal to do that. And that is one of the greatest mistake that a lot of persons would have made. I've been in contact with persons who have been in movies, and they themselves were involved in the sex act, and sometimes they don't even know what's happening to them, glorifying of other persons, and expect to see that you'd want to reconsider and get it and just enjoy the beauty of what there is.
The porn, but also the masturbation. It's like in many cases.
Doubled or more now. But for those, there's no need for you to feel condemned.
Mm-hmm.
And your session, I say session and previous episode, I would have shared that there's no need to feel ashamed. Because when you feel ashamed, you tend to pull yourself away from where the support can come, even from God. But when you have a sense of, okay, this could be wrong, so you have a sense of right wrong, you are more drawn to go where you can get support and forgiveness within the context. And the truth be told, if you didn't know that it was something you're doing wrong, it while the penalty of the law does not depend on your whether your knowledge or ignorance of it, in this context, we still have a great God who understands motives.
Yes.
So that's what I'd like for you to know. Don't feel guilty and ashamed. And if you need to talk through this some more, find a counselor, and if you can't find somebody, send us messages, direct messages on Facebook, and we'll see how best we can link you with someone who can guide you through. But there are some things that can be done in terms of liberating your body and your energy. So you do creative things like dancing and exercise and affirm yourself and ensure that you are not depending on the sexual arousal alone to make you feel like a human being. I've listened to somebody who literally shared that the longest they stay out of sexual relationship, and they have changed many. The longest they have changed is the date that they break up with this partner and the last day of their next menstrual cycle. They literally cannot live without sex.
Mm.
And for them, if it is a million times they have a breakup, they are going to have a million partners.
Mm-hmm.
And for those who don't go outrightly and do that, I remember Dr. Bell, you mentioned something about the persons who are Christians and they want to be safe, so they don't want to get involved sexually and to get pregnant, or they don't want to do anything with others because, that is what would be they look at as
Mm-hmm.
this. But there are persons who do that, and I know persons might be listening either now or for the replay and
Mm-hmm.
could testify that they have lost some good moments and they've lost some good relationships
Mm-hmm.
because they were involved in masturbation and pornography, and they absolutely cannot satisfy anybody else except themselves.
Mm-hmm.
What else can we do? Okay, our questions are coming in now.
Yes, so I see a question there, and I think that's a very appropriate question because I was going to go there. I understand that, we want to talk about those who have fallen into that trap, but let's talk about some of our parents, like myself, who have younger children that are, going to be exposed to that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Um, and you're trying to help them to avoid that pitfall. What are some of the things that parents can do to equip their children to be able to face the giants of masturbation and pornography as they venture into their teen years, where their bodies are literally, you know, working against them in this regard? They're having all their hormones telling them that they need all of these things. How do you equip a parent who is looking for that kind of information to help them get through that?
I think one of the things, you want to go ahead, Doc?
Before you answer that question, I just want to look here with Roberta's question. How do people usually begin down that road? Is it childhood sexual abuse or over sexualization?
That's a good
If
question.
those two contribute to it, and it's an excellent question, and I believe this could be the possible answer: the early sexual abuse and the over sexualization of the children. And in your answering that, I'm sure you would also address that as it relates to how do we prepare our parents to treat with that.
So there are a number of factors that could lead to someone moving into pornography. What the literature actually shows is that for pornography, many persons are now being exposed by the heavy use of the internet. So they will be here watching something, and here comes pop up
Yes.
an image,
Mm-hmm.
and out of curiosity the person begins to look at, and
Mm-hmm.
because of the sexual arousal, the feelings, the person becomes drawn to watching more and more and more. And many persons will tell you that is, and young people between the ages of 8 and 17, that is
Mhm,
how they got caught up in um pornography, because they were exposed through the internet.
Mm-hmm.
mhm,
Sometimes too, and I know of this in my practice, where parents may be engaging in watching pornography
Okay.
and have these tapes,
Mm-hmm.
have the channel set up, and kids again may butt into seeing this, and then again, because of its addictive nature, they too may get caught up in it. Because I've known of situations where children are watching, accidentally butt into their parents' pornographic literature, their CDs and so on, and they themselves are now hiding and watching because they know that it's not right for them to do it. Sexual abuse too could become part of that, where because of early sexual arousal, especially early age, children may masturbate because they have been sexually excited and sexually aroused. So there are a number of reasons why sex, not just sexual abuse, but some of what I mentioned before could play out in um, these two sexual acts.
Excellent, excellent. So what about our parents though? What are some of the things? Because you know what, Dr.
Yeah.
Bell, I can tell you that I learned more about sex from my friends than I did my parents. Especially when it comes down to these two items. How can we equip parents to be more comfortable around the subject? And why is it important for them to create healthy, environment for their children to come and have a conversation with them if this is something that they're struggling with? Because, sometimes, as parents, we tend to come down a little bit hard with the whip when it comes down to these things. How can we make it a little bit more comfortable to have the conversation?
So first of all, we have to destigmatize sex. We have to start from there, because we have to start with the fact that it is our awesome God, our awesome creator who created sex. And so it's not a dirty thing. And so parents should not be afraid. They should start from the fact that God created this and he created boundaries around it. And so parents from very early should be having the conversation. We're not talking about sexual abuse now, but because of the proliferation of sexual abuse, this conversation about sex and sexuality should be had from very, very early with our children, helping them to recognize that there is good touch, bad touch,
Yes.
and these good touch, bad touch, when, if they should encounter, what they need to be doing, and so on. So once parents have those conversations in a normalized way around sex, that the children would now have a healthy view of what sex should be like, and then the engagement in other sexual activities would not be so attractive to a child who understands the beauty of sex and the beauty of the fact that, again, this is an act created by our great creator.
I appreciate your response, Dr. Bell. And let me just highlight what's on the screen here. It says, yes, sexual abuse does not require penetration, inappropriate sexual exposure, example, seeing adults in the sexual act. Is that correct? You're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct, Roberta. There, we are talking about parents educating or children, and the earlier you start, the better it is. And the first time, what used to happen, this a lot of people use as a joke to say, in the earlier days, people would, go and they're timid to talk to their children about sex, and they are telling them, well, in my case, my sex education from my mother was, no make what happened to Miss Computer's daughter happen to you, you know. I can't call any name because I don't want to. Yeah. But that's the only thing I heard from my mother about sex education. And the only reason I heard that is because Miss Computer daughter was pregnant. So the only thing I heard, no, make what happened to Miss Computer, that happened to you. And nowadays, you're finding out when you are saying to the children and you're timid, you don't know what to talk to them about sex and so on, and you call them and say, okay, well, it's time for us to have that conversation. And you're mustering the courage, to say about, and they're like, what are you talking about? You want to talk to me about sex? Because
Yes.
they are so much exposed to the knowledge of what's happening. And what you shared earlier, Shauna, in terms of the age in the 13-year, the teenager, if those things don't happen to you, you're not normal.
Right.
If you don't have sexual arousal and feeling like you need to have sexual intercourse, you're not normal. It's how to manage that.
Right.
That is important.
And I think
Okay, so yeah.
I think that's the message in here. I think overall, what we're trying to tell people is, if you first take it back to its original purpose in terms of why it was created, you're not going to have a lot of challenges when it comes on to understanding the value that should be placed on it. And I think that's a very important piece. And then the other piece has to do with the dangers of, if you engage in the behavior, that the behavior ends up control it. Well, it can control you if it's not managed well. So yeah. Yeah.
Right. So we want to move into the question and answer speak up segment. But before we go that, I would just want to encourage individuals who are listening, whether you're listening to the live or you will be listening to the replay. And we must be conscious, Shauna, even, of the fact that the change of time, different time zone has affected our viewership, but that's fine. We are still doing this because we know that you are going to be looking at it sometime. Have the conversation about sex. Talk about sex. So have sex talks with your children and your partner, but the one with the children must be appropriate, age appropriate, relevant, and important for their development. And the one with the partner should be appropriate, relevant for your enjoyment. Have a sex night date at date time. So similar, you have different rituals in your home for different things to build family relationship. As wife and husband, as a couple, have conversations. Talk about what you like, what you don't like, what it is that you would, and that's where the exploration comes in, because you belong to each other.
Yes, I agree with you on that. And I'm not sure, Janine is probably going to have to explain to me what this is all about with this subject matter.
Questions.
Wash your hand is like
Janine, can you please clarify in the chat what you mean by that? Because we need some clarification. But
It's COVID time. Sanitization.
But it's not only that, it's a real thing, Doc. You'd say it's as a joke, but it's a real thing. You're in COVID time and your partner is away or have to engage in working out and those kind of things. And how do you satisfy yourself? Why not authorize masturbation and pornography? I'm not expecting you to answer. I'm just saying these are some things that people will be thinking. And I may say this here though, during this week, I posed the question that we had on the Facebook page in a particular group and just said, here's a conversation that I'll be having. Just want to hear your expression. And man, within no more than 5 minutes, there were 85 comments, and they were varied from the extremes. It's like, okay, immediately as I see this, it's like you're condemning persons who are engaging in these things and you're shaming them and those kind of things. So I had to respond and soften it in a sense to say, no, it is not our intention to condemn nor shame. It is our intention to have a honest, open, healthy conversation about the matter, because it is very pertinent to what's happening. And some of them, saying that for a Christian community, some were brave enough to ask, what is your target audience? Is it Christian community or otherwise? Because there are some persons who they are fully sold on the matter of pornography and masturbation, but within a Christian environment, this is a healthy conversation that needs to be had, and it's very relevant and
Yes.
current. So I was guided by that. I didn't have permission because it was my intent to be getting information to be utilized. So I could not put the person's name and their response here. But I'm telling you, that took me to a deep, and I mean, I had to become so open and be very realistic and to say there's something like what we call, Dr. Bell, cognitive reconstruction that we'll have to go through
Yes.
to reconstruct our thinking and processing of this whole thing, because there are honest Christian persons who are out there who have been and are still masturbating and watching porn to excite themselves because they do not want to get to sin with somebody else. And how do we do that? The reconstruction of the mind and get ourselves in a space where we can engage in a conversation. And maybe it is what prevents some people from finding a mate and wanting to find somebody, because everything else is well for them. And the only thing that is missing is sexual enjoyment. And they are claiming that if they can do that for themselves, why? And it was mentioned earlier, the selfishness about it. And also, the truth of the matter is, I want to take this even further. There are some persons, their experience has been so bad that they don't want anything to do with anybody, especially the opposite sex. They don't want anything to do with anybody because they have been battered and bruised, and their sexual experience has been so bad that even the word sex causes them to tremble and cringe, have those memories. How do we treat with people like those and be fair to them while we support them through this?
I wanted to just touch on this particular aspect of it, because I know that, when it gets to the point of addiction, we always say if it's sex addiction, then you need to get treatment. And I want to hear from you guys. At what point does one say, I really have a problem with this? Like, what factors can I look to in my own behavior and my drives, or just things that I can use as metrics to say, Shauna, you really have a problem. You need to get this thing sorted out. At what point do I, come to that awareness and take action?
Well, if we were going to look at it, for example, from a psychological point of view, in terms of how a disorder is diagnosed, from it's affecting your social, occupational, and school functioning,
Mm-hmm.
to a point where you're not functioning in those areas, then it becomes an issue. So,
Okay.
for example, if somebody is masturbating and it's taking up their work time and they can't function because it's has become a part of them, so much so that they can cut into work time, or even if they're at work, the concentration is not there, because usually, even for pornography, the image I heard is replayed over and over in your head. So it becomes an obsession, it becomes an addiction, it becomes thoughts that are ruminating kind of thoughts. So if you are functioning in that way and recognize that this is consuming your whole being and affecting how you're functioning, it becomes a problem.
Mm, okay.
Yeah.
So
And
if
treat it as you would treat the signs and symptoms of depression, if you know what that depression is, because there are some persons who masturbate in public. They are so accustomed to masturbating and pornography. I was in a workplace recently, and it was a business place actually. I was going through the door and I had some stuff in my hand. And the guard, the person who was doing the sanitizing and the temperature, a young lady passed. And the gentleman, which is normal and supposed to be okay, his eyes moved with the young lady. And when you look at him, you could actually see it's almost like I'm coming to get you, no matter what the cost. It's not an admiration. You know the difference between an admiration, what a lovely
A
man.
healthy.
But it's like you could see it's almost like if he could just drop everything in his hand and get her, he
She
would.
becomes a sexual object.
A sexual object. So that's weird. Those are some of the things. And people, you're in public and tending to do some acts that you know it's only because of the sexual arousal that people do those things. Like, can't explain too much. But I've seen enough in public places. So when it gets to that and it's threatening your ability to function, you need to get help. We do not have much more time. And I saw, is there a question? Is there a question that came up? I
Yes,
just want to share one more.
yes. Roberta is asking a question, and I think the rest of her question is at the bottom here. So I'll just go ahead and read it. She says that, so if we consider sex as a sacred act, can we agree that anything outside of the marital confines for anything sexual would be a violation of the sacredness of sex? And would that mean that masturbation and porn are in violation of the laws of sex? Is that what you're saying, ladies? Ha.
That's a tough one. But go ahead, Doc.
So remember, God made Adam and Eve, and He made them for procreation, and so the marriage, from a Christian perspective, the marriage is that binding force for those two individuals. And God again goes and He gave laws that gave us boundaries in terms of sexual activity, and He said that should be within sex should be within the boundaries of a marriage. And so if someone is masturbating, it means that, again, that self-centeredness is self-sex. You're not having sex with your partner, so it's self-sex. And if pornography, again, as we had outlined earlier, you are watching, and that's what's taking up most of your time, and your partner is not being satisfied, they feel objectified, and they feel like they're not loved, then in a sense, those two acts would then be considered as violating those boundaries that God has set.
Okay.
In my mind, based on the question.
Yes, I think that's a good answer. And
nothing to add.
Sister Roxanne said mercy, and I know exactly how she saw me when she said that.
Happy to have you.
This is another important piece, and I think what Roberta is pointing out here, if you remember Jeffrey Tubin, that CNN, very brilliant legal commentator on CNN, actually was suspended, and I'm not sure if they're going to bring him back on ever, because of the same distortion of masturbation. He was doing it even while he was supposed to be working, and a camera was on him and he didn't know.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you see, that's too is that. Sorry, Doc, you go ahead. I'll come in.
No, man, I will allow you anytime.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to reference the point that was made earlier in terms of what Sean had asked and how you had answered, in terms of when do you know that I have a problem and I need help. For some persons, they may not even get to that place where they recognize that they're having a problem. And that's one of the reasons I'd said treat it as you treat depression. because you get into the mode of doing oral. Well, why is that coming out? That,
We're not talking about that
Freudian
tonight.
we're
slip.
not talking about that. I don't know why.
Please.
I have no idea about masturbation and pornography in such a way that that it overcomes you. It traps you, and you don't want that.
Right.
Some
Mhm.
people are this, but yeah, you don't want that. Go ahead, Doc.
Yeah, so I actually was saying, in a similar vein, that pornography and
Masturbation.
masturbation,
Hmm.
if overdone and overdone and overdone, it's going to affect the relationships.
Hmm.
Definitely will affect. I think we quickly want to also look at the how to kind of get ourselves out of that bind.
Right.
And
Hmm.
so, for example, if this has become so detrimental to us in terms of the lack of functioning, appropriate functioning, then we want to examine what the consequences are. Are we losing our relationship? Is it affecting our jobs? Is it
Hmm.
affecting my schooling, and so
Your
on?
relationship
And
with God.
and our relationship, well, not everybody have a relationship, so to speak,
Hmm.
with God. But again, if you are Christian, then that would definitely be what we'd want to make sure that we are not damaging that relationship. Make a commitment to
Mhm.
stop. And if it's those pop-ups and if it's all of that, make sure that you are not using your computer alone, so that you are
Yes.
helping yourself to prevent yourself from doing that. So exit sites that come up that may have those pornographic content, and
Hmm.
then seek
Hmm.
professional help if you find that this is really interfering with your mental as well as psychological health. Seek professional help.
Hmm.
Although it's not listed as a disorder, neither
No.
pornography nor masturbation is listed as a disorder. If it is affecting you, as we made mention, then it becomes an
Mm.
issue because it's affecting and eroding other aspects of
Right.
your
Hmm.
life and your
Hmm.
well-being. So
Hmm.
then that's a problem for you, although it is not listed as a disorder.
Hmm. I want to thank Tanisha for Lawrence for bailing me out.
Tanisha
She
is
said
trying
it's
to
not.
save you. Tanisha is trying to save you, but she can't save you.
I appreciate that. Go ahead, Shana.
No, I said Tanisha was trying to save you, but she can't really save you from that one.
Yeah, it's been an intriguing. It's a good discussion that we've had so far, and
Mhm.
I put myself in the listener's perspective, even though I am participating here in terms of sharing and educating, and I get the sense of respect. I feel respected, if you understand what I'm saying. I'm voicing this because per adventure, some of the persons who had responded to the post that I made in such a short time to make it appear as if we intended to shame people. And I just want to ask the audience, those who are listening, just tell us what do you feel about this conversation? How has it been for you? Is it something that is valued, and would you recommend your colleagues and friends and family members to watch this so that they can be educated about the topic?
Mhm.
However you want to indicate it, a thumbs up, a smiley face, or yeah, however you want to do that.
Turn down.
Um, or yeah, we are okay. We are good with evaluation. One of the things that you can do, in addition to what Dr. Bell mentioned, is that reignite your, is it dopamine, Dr. Bell? That, yeah.
Chemical release.
So the chemical in your body. So basically, you can do that by doing something very creative and funny and crazy creative. Bomber jumping,
Really? No, no.
think outside the box. Do something that the adrenaline would be excited about life. And I said it before, and I want to say it again. Don't be so dependent on sexual gratification
Right.
that it cripples you. Find other way to feel satisfied and gratified. And this is something that we ought to do for our children. Observe them while we train them about good touch and bad touch. It was a 2-year-old boy who was being taught good touch and bad touch who discovered that a young lady, not even a teenager, was a sex addict. And it was discovered because he knew what to expect and what not to expect, and he made a declaration. And when it was probed into, they found out that the person, the young lady, so both of them were saved. That one was saved from future issues, and then the other one had gotten help. So observe your children. Some children, they don't understand, and they can openly in the room, in the house, touching, their private part. Help them to understand why they shouldn't. Don't just yell at them and bawl at them and curse them, and no, don't do that. Help them to understand that this is a natural part of your development, and you're gonna feel that way. It may feel good now, but later on, you want to reserve those feelings for when you're ready to really, really enjoy. And like me to something, I'm not asking you to tell your children this because they may not know. One of my very close friends, after she got married and she traveled, and when the plane was touching down, she called me back and said, "Man, this feels like a good orgasm." That was our first time traveling. The bottom line is, if you don't, I mean, have the conversation. Let people know that you're a real human being. As I said, if you're not having these experiences, you're not real. But manage them. Don't abuse yourself, and don't abuse others.
And Doc, I see where Roberta made a point here, and I think it's such an excellent point to make because I mentioned it at the beginning, didn't want to go too deep into it. But the truth is, everything good that God has created for human benefit, the enemy has literally destroyed it or distorted it and used it for his own purpose. I think about something as beautiful as dance. The Bible dance before God. He has over sexualized dance in such a way that now even some Christians consider it sinful to engage in dancing and so on. And so I just want to say that there are definite spiritual implications. And I mean, at such that would be such a deep topic. We will not be able to touch that tonight. In terms of your feeling distanced from God, because as you engage in pornography, as you engage in these kinds of behaviors, you're definitely being pulled away from your spiritual connection. And once that happens, then the shame sets in, then the guilt sets in, and the enemy finds ways of accusing you, and you feel like, I can't go back and say to God, I'm sorry for what I did. And that's when he wants you to stay forever. And so I think the call to action here this evening, if I'm taking away from both of our speakers who are experts in terms of the psychological implications on people and relationship, I believe that the biggest thing here is that you can never go too far for God to find you and restore you back to your rightful purpose. And don't allow the enemy to destroy God's image in you. That's the takeaway for me, Doc. So thank you guys so much for this.
Appreciate. Dr. Bell, what's your takeaway?
So I am thinking that when we look at the topic from the two perspectives, the spiritual side and the other side, in terms of looking at those, so those who come from that spiritual side have to adhere to the greatest awesome person in the universe, those guidelines that are given. I believe so. Those who are on the outside, I would say, coming from a psychological perspective, if this is affecting you and your relationships, both relationships, your work, or your school functioning, it means there is a problem, and that problem should be addressed in your best interest. So we can see both sides of it. One, the Christian side, we must adhere to the principles outlined by God. And the other side, which would be the psychological piece for the other sets of persons, that once you are being affected from that perspective, then help needs to be given. If you're not having any issues, well, I don't know, but this two school of thoughts would be: one, nothing is wrong with it, but with that, because they have guidelines from the Bible that guides them. For the person on the outside, they could see me and my relationships, and what can I do about it?
Right.
Powerful. I appreciate both perspective and your summaries and your charge to the group. Just as we're about to finish, we have had several good talking points coming in from our listeners, and we value them. Thank you so very much for sharing. If you are actually here and you came in late, we ask that you look at the replay, but we close our segment of Let's Talk Life and Legacy, a moment with Dr. Grace today. We've had a great conversation about exploring the impact of masturbation and pornography on people, and we pray and hope that each of you would have had away, and that you can encourage someone to value them, to love themselves enough and not to hurt themselves. Sex was made for recreation and procreation, and it is so powerful that it needs to be contained